Warning. This podcast contains spoilers for House of the Dragon Episode 6, so be warned and be careful. Dragons have arrived on HBO Max, the new HBO original series House of the Dragon. Have you guys heard about this? There's a prequel set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon tells the story of House Targaryen locked in an epic battle for the Iron Throne and power over the Seven Kingdoms. The epic series promises more drama and betrayal than ever. Listen to the official Game of Thrones podcast, House of the Dragon, on HBO Max, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcast. And to celebrate, we're back with some Ask the Maester from the Citadel to answer your questions. Let's go.
Kristen and many, many others asked us, can we infer that the father is the one who contributes the silver Targaryen hair gene from the way that we've seen Rhaenyra's children be portrayed in the show?
Right. Harwin Strong is allegedly...
Just allegedly. No proof.
Is allegedly the father of Rhaenyra's now 3 children, and of course they all resemble him, certainly in terms of their hair color, brunette hair. No. First of all, we have no better example than Jon Snow, whose father is Rhaegar Targaryen, whose mother is Lyanna Stark, and who he himself... very fatefully and honestly, luckily for him, had the brown hair, because had he had the silver hair, Robert Baratheon would have wanted him dead and would have easily been able to identify him. There are other examples. Now, certainly it seems like hair color is more dominant coming from the male side of the parentage. That said, it's not always the case. There's other examples throughout history. Aegor Rivers is one of the bastards of Aegon IV, one of the worst Targaryen kings, had black hair. Daemon Targaryen, who's son of Maekar, had sandy brown hair and a blonde beard. Rhaenys Targaryen, daughter of Rhaegar, and Elia Martell, may she rest in peace, brown hair. So it's not always the case. This is just luck, basically, that these 3 children weren't born with the silver hair. They could have been, but it just didn't happen. It's not necessarily a coin flip, but it does seem more likely again that if the father has the silver hair, they will be likely to have it. But again, it doesn't have to happen.
Okay, this was a big recurring question.
Big topic.
Reed, Tahania, Peter, Erica, and many, many others wanted to know. And I think this is very interesting today because we see a scene that made me think of this too. Are the Targaryens fireproof? Daenerys survived the fire when she was held captive by the Dothraki, but Laena died by Vhagar's flames. What gives? I will also say we saw Daemon just ride through the dragon fire today and come out unscathed. So what gives?
Well, first of all, we need to draw a distinction between regular fire. A lot of people who asked this question said, Daenerys walked out of that Dothraki longhouse completely unscathed. She kicked over the braziers. Nothing happened. And of course, we saw her touch a scalding hot dragon's egg earlier in the run of Game of Thrones in season 1. Nothing happened. She was in that. She walked into the funeral pyre of Mirri Maz Duur, and then nothing happened, and then her dragon eggs hatched. Well, I should add, first of all, that Targaryens being fireproof in the books is not really a thing. George has said specifically that when Daenerys walks out of Mirri Maz Duur's funeral pyre unscathed and she has her 3 baby dragons, that was a specific and unique magical event that is not meant to suggest in any way that she has, any kind of resistance to fire. That Targaryens in general have a resistance to fire. That was a one-off, unique, essentially miracle event. It's important to understand that there's a difference between fire and dragon fire. Dragons are magic, right? They how do they just understand Valyrian speech? As they did, Daenerys is a great example of this, right? We're seeing the dragon trainers at work in the dragon pit now. But Daenerys's dragons, Dany's dragons, just knew speech. They understood it. They understood the commands immediately. How does a bond between the dragon rider and the dragon work? We don't know a lot of these things, but the thing we do know is that dragons are magical creatures. They are referred to in the books often as fire made flesh. And the fire they generate is just different than regular fire. First of all, just in terms of temperature and intensity, it comes out as a constant jet of flame. Unlike the other kind of fire that you find in this world that's more like ambient heat and smoke, right? This is a jet of focused flame on something. And it's been used for magical purposes in the past. Valyrian steel, we can surmise. This isn't for sure known, but it is heavily suggested that Valyrian steel was forged using magical spells, some kind of understanding of metallurgy that is advanced and now has been lost, and dragonfire as the catalyst for forging this material. And of course, Valyrian steel along with dragon glass are the only two substances that can slay White Walkers. And what do they have in common? They're kind of solidified fire. So, yes, Targaryens and those with Targaryen lineage are resistant to fire, but there's a difference between fire resistant and fireproof, and there is a difference between dragon fire and regular flame. Now, we do see Daemon and Laena playing with the fire. They kind of like roll through this kind of like plume of dragon fire up in the sky. Again, that's resistant. That's resistant. We're flying through a kind of like burst of fire. It is very different than a dragon, and we're talking about Vhagar, the biggest, oldest dragon alive right now, releasing a constant and focused jet of dragon flame onto a Targaryen person. That's gonna incinerate a Targaryen. That's gonna incinerate metal. That's how the Iron Throne was forged. That has taken out armies. That is just a different kind of flame.
Okay, Zachary asks, could King Viserys have sent Daemon to the wall? Was the watch relevant during this time period?
So I'm assuming this is this would be for the crime or the rumor that he had slept with
or
Rhaenyra.
just getting him out of
the way.
Get him out of the way.
He could do that, although to do that would be to admit that Rhaenyra in this kind of patriarchal society was quote unquote sullied, and that we've heard Viserys say, well, who would want to marry her in a situation like he says this to Daemon, and to admit that would be to essentially damage any kind of like future marriage hopes for her, and so he would never do that. But to answer your other question, yeah, the watch was relevant during this time period, though the watch has been like steadily losing its importance ever since its formation during the Long Night, when they played a pivotal role in beating back the White Walkers unknown centuries ago, like 10,000 years ago, a very, very long time ago. They've been steadily losing prestige because, of course, the Walkers don't return until the events of Game of Thrones, again, thousands and thousands of years later. And so the mission had kind of changed from, saving the world to basically wildling management, not to underrate some of the severity of these occasional wildling incursions. Sometimes they have seized significant territory and even sacked important castles like over the course of history. But it is significantly a less prestigious mission than like saving the entire world from ultimate evil, right? That said, though the watch has been kind of like eroding before the realm's eyes, it is in much better shape than it was when we catch up with it in Game of Thrones. First of all, records indicate that when Aegon came ashore, there were 10,000 men in the watch. That dwindled to like less than 1,900 something by the time Game of Thrones hits and Jon Snow joins the Order. So we should assume 200 years prior to the events of that show that the watch is in just better shape than it is when we meet it in Game of Thrones. And also it had received a kind of a boost semi-recently, 50 years before House of the Dragon, when King Jaehaerys was early in his reign. He was touring the realm, kind of like getting to know the realm and meeting with his lords and the various people that he rules over. And Queen Alysanne came with him, and she took a real interest in the Watch, toured the castles, spent time with them, and it was at her urging and with consultations with Lord Alaric Stark, who was the Lord of Winterfell at the time, that the Watch was given an increased amount of land with which to forage from. So called the New Gift. Originally, the Watch was given this kind of band of land directly south of the Wall that was called the Gift. And at Alysanne's urging, that amount of land was doubled to another 25 leagues to 50 leagues south of the Wall, all of this constant band of land south of the Wall, so that the Watch could more readily provide for itself. And this really kind of like upped the prestige of the Watch, and Queen Alysanne was beloved by the Watch for this. And this was within living memory. So the Watch is relevant at this time, though really not an option for King Viserys to get rid of Daemon at this time.
Yeah, that makes I like your reasoning there of like the admittance of guilt if you punish him. Because like you said, the Watch is relevant, the Watch is relatively prestigious, but you can't send him there because then people will know.
People will be like, so that's true.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess it's true.
Okay, Mike asks, and this is another one I think a lot of people are really interested in. Who can ride dragons? Has there ever been someone with no Targaryen lineage at all who has ever tamed and ridden a dragon? Can you explain the concept of dragon seeds?
Sure. Well, the Targaryens are one of the family of dragon lords, the oligarchic kind of rulers of old Valyria. There are many families, such as it's like 30 or so families, of which the Targaryens were kind of like a not that important member of. So yeah, there were previously many, many, many families that could ride dragons. Only the Targaryens survived the doom of the dragon riders. There's lots of people with Valyrian lineage. In fact, a lot of the population of the free cities of Essos, as we've talked about, are people that, are Valyrian colonists and people with Valyrian lineage. But the Targaryens are the only dragon riders that survived. Post-Doom, we don't know of anybody who is not Targaryen or have some amount of Targaryen lineage that has ever ridden a dragon. We don't know that has ever happened. So for all intents and purposes, you have to be a Targaryen, at least in part, to be able to ride a dragon. Now, the dragon seeds are Targaryen bastards who have, again, one quarter, a half, some amount of Targaryen blood, but are not, produced by royal marriage and any kind of authentic, legitimate means, who potentially could have the ability to ride dragons because they have that Targaryen blood. So basically, the only people that can ride dragons right now, as far as we know, are people with Targaryen blood.
This is I love this one because
this is a hot theory.
This episode is really leans into it with the appearance of all the rats and kind of the focus of the rats. So there is someone in our Discord who had also proposed this theory, but there's so many people in the House of the Dragon Discord that I couldn't find it. But I want to say that was the first place I saw this theory, almost straight after the episode came out. So I want to shout out to them. But we got questions from a lot of people about this. Nathan, Tony, a bunch of other people. Do you think it's possible that anyone we currently know in this show is a Greenseer, Warg, skin changer? There is a theory online that credit to Joe Magician.
The great Joe Magician, who is a good friend and a great content creator in the A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones community.
Yeah, and that prediction, which currently feels very likely, is that Larys Strong is a warg who is potentially using rats as his whisper network in King's Landing. I
would say that, of course, it's possible that Larys is warging into the rats, and that is how he's hearing all these conversations. And we know from seeing him over the course of this series that he loves to put himself in the middle of conversations and just kind of sit there, understanding that because of his disability, people are not going to see him honestly as a full person. They'll just see him as like an object that is sitting there. Now, that said, I lean against it only because, well, for various reasons, but mainly because most of the wargs, the Greenseers that we know of from the books are Northerners, Starks included, and folks from north of the wall, wildlings. There are a very, very few examples of wargs being born south of the neck, not in the north. Brynden Rivers, a.k.a. the Three-Eyed Crow, remember him? A famous Targaryen bastard, was very involved in the Blackfire rebellions and then was sent to the wall in what, after the revelation of Aegon's prophecy, now seems like a very, very pointed plan hatched by Aegon V with his allies to kind of prepare for the appearance of the White Walkers. Brynden Rivers, the Three-Eyed Crow, had some green seeing ability, we know. Okay, there's a Southerner. That's basically it. That's basically it. There's some other rumors of houses like the Farwinds who, could take on the forms of lions and walruses and stuff like that. That's just kind of like rumor and conjecture. And so I lean away from it only for that reason. That, well, there's other reasons, but I lean away from it for that reason, because it feels like this is a thing that we associate with, one, the blood of the first men, Brynden Rivers aside, who knows how that happened, and the North. The culture and the quote-unquote magic of the North, and the kind of like bloodlines that seem very strong beyond the wall, because like all the preponderance, Stark family aside, because we think that certainly the bonds that the Starks showed that they had with their direwolves is very wargy. Okay, and then Arya in the books, Arya has many dreams where she is like running with her former direwolf, and that feels very wargy. And certainly Jon Snow does things that feel like a warg. But aside from them, it's like all wildlings. Those are all the wargs. So now the Strongs are a family descended from the blood of the first men. Okay, so I'm going to say that it's possible, but I kind of lean against it. And then the kind of cheating reason is, it feels like not. Story-wise, it feels like a thing they wouldn't do, but who knows? It could. Yeah. It certainly. We are meant to look at those rats and wonder where they are coming from. I feel like it's an allusion to the fact that there are these secret passages that riddle the castle, and not to do anything spoilery, but those passageways absolutely come into play in a way that. Deals with rats, I'll just say. So I lean no, but you never know. And certainly, again, the Strongs descend from the blood of the first men. So maybe there's a random warg out there that knows how to do this. And certainly Larys feels like a very ominous figure. But I kind of doubt it, but we'll see.
I think you're right. He wouldn't, even if hypothetically he was a Greenseer, the way that society is set up in King's Landing, he wouldn't actually even need to warg, because he is just invisible to everyone because of his disability and his standing. Okay, now this is a very interesting one from Emily that I really like, because it also leads to a question I want to ask you that's kind of very related to this. Laena was talking to her daughter, and she mentioned that Laena herself didn't get a dragon until she was 15. Does that mean the egg didn't hatch until then, or that she got it another way?
That means, first of all, we should understand that as a member like of the Valyrian family, it's only like recently that the Valyrians became dragon riders when Rhaenys married Corlys and brought that ability through the joining of Valyrian blood and her own dragon, which, and the fact that the Vhagar is out there, laying eggs and flying around as a wild dragon, and brought that possibility to House Valyrian. But no, what this means probably is that it may be that Laena was presented with an egg and it didn't hatch, but she rides Vhagar, which we knew from earlier in the from a conversation that she had when she was like 11 with the king. Remember that, when they were walking in the gardens and she said, tell me about Balerion. Vhagar is still, what do you remember of Vhagar? And then she talks about how the fishermen down in Spicetown, which is a trading town on Driftmark, which is the seat of House Valyrian, are always talking about they can hear the dragon song of Vhagar and that it sounds sad. That was meant to heavily suggest to us that wherever Vhagar has been since the death of its last rider, Balon the Brave, the fourth son of Jaehaerys, that it's probably been nesting around Driftmark. So while we don't know the circumstances, and I'm sad that this happened off screen, my assumption is that Laena found where Vhagar was nesting, and of course Laena has that Targaryen lineage through Rhaenys, so would be able to make that, to forge that bond with a dragon, and then my friend Aziz, who runs the History of Westeros podcast with his partner Ashaya, tweeted today, quote, "Seems like a good time to remind folks that there are zero, zilch known examples of a Targaryen trying to bond with an unbonded dragon and getting hurt or even killed in the process." All of which is to say, what we know from the books is that when Targaryens approach a dragon that is free to bond with, they're almost always successful, and certainly always successful. Like, it never fails. So that's, Laena probably just found where Vhagar was nesting, made the approach, and clearly it was successful.
Okay, so when one of my favorite moments is Laena says to Rhaena, her daughter, who hasn't, the egg hasn't hatched, she says, "You are Targaryen, you've just got to claim it." That's obviously what Laena did with Vhagar. What do you think the likelihood is that Rhaena claims Vhagar now Laena is dead?
I think that that's the plan.
Yeah, right?
I think that that's the plan, and I think that is the plan. I'll just say that I think that's the plan.
That's a good idea that somebody may have. I thought that was, I really liked the way they set that up. And finally, okay, I mean, this is just, I think everyone, I don't know if you're going to have any necessary insight into this, because I think this is just a question that the show will likely answer at some point. But Owen says, "It seems like Daemon has everything he needed to seize power for himself." True. What has he been doing for 10 years?
I understand the feeling and the suspicion even that would be Daemon's end goal. First of all, I think everything that we've seen is that Daemon greatly loves his brother and honestly just wants attention from his brother. Everything he does is to get attention from his brother, and when he doesn't get it, that's when he loses his bearings. Next, I think that we also need to understand, remember Alicent's shock that Larys would do what he has done, which is would basically murder his father and his brother. Kinslaying is the worst thing that you can do in this world. You are cursed. Even in war, if a family member kills another family member, that is a stain that stays with you. Maegor the Cruel, the third king of Westeros, usurped the throne from the heir of the second king of Westeros, Aenys, when he killed yet another Aegon, when he killed Crown Prince Aegon, son of Aenys, the stain of the kinslayer was on him, and he was seen even from that moment, even though it was in the midst of a war, technically, an illegal war, you have to say, but it was in war that he slayed him. That stain of kinslaying stayed with him. So it's actually unthinkable, weirdly. It sounds weird to say. It's unthinkable for everyone in this world, including Daemon, that Daemon would do this. And when the possibility is raised earlier in the season by, I think it's Master of Coin, Lyman Beesbury, it's a shocking, he doesn't come right out and say it. He kind of suggests it, like, oh, what if plots were out there against the king or something to that effect. That's a shocking charge, to even bring up. And it's just a thing that no one would do. They actually wouldn't do it. If Daemon was actually going to depose his brother, he would do something like lock him up in a dungeon forever. He wouldn't actually kill him. Because, in this world, your family is the only kind of security that there actually is. Everybody can turn against you except your family. And that is a sacred, sacred, sacred thing to these people. And to uphold that, all but the most evil of these characters would never strike out at their family members. Why do we know that Larys is an evil, cold-hearted son of a bitch? Because he went through with it. He was like, yeah, I'll kill my dad, I'll kill my brother, no problem. So yeah, Daemon would actually not do that. He would never do it. That's it for this week's Ask the Maester. Don't miss the new HBO original series, House of the Dragon. Have you heard about this show, folks? Streaming now on HBO Max, Sundays at 9 p.m. And, of course, we want to hear from you. Send your questions to askthemaester@gmail.com.